Well, hello there, guys. This is new DM Ariel. Um, Thank you for joining me back in the channel. And I'm coming to you from Northern California again on a Friday. This time, you usually have videos, Dungeons and Dragons Saturday. But because I have a couple of errands and some things that I have to do tomorrow, I'm not sure if I'm gonna get to record a video. So I just went ahead and did it earlier this week. So it's Friday afternoon and I'm still in the channel looking at Dungeons and Dragons second edition. Here's my copy of the second edition player's handbook, and unfortunately, I'm not playing in a second edition campaign or even running one right now. Haven't really found a second edition campaign, but I have been fascinated by learning the rules, the core rules, and getting a flavor for advanced Dungeons and Dragons (AD&D). This really was the last time that they really called it AD&D or Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, because as you know, if you know the history of the game, the TSR sold or was bought out by Wizards of the Coast around 2000, and by then they didn't call it AD&D. They just plain called it Dungeons and Dragons because they wanted to rebrand the game, and they came out with their own version, which is we know today as 3.0 and later 3.5, which had a lot of additions and changed a lot of the rules. Well, they're kind of like supplemented more than changed, but they did make some alterations. And if you've been following this channel, you also know that uh, we also take a look at the video game scape. We looked at some MMOs that are heavily influenced or directly influenced or just influenced by Dungeons and Dragons. MMOs like World of Warcraft and EverQuest and things like that. What I find really interesting is, we've done some this character create, shown some character creation for those different type of MMOs. But what I find really interesting is that we have different games that take that are loosely based, at least somewhat based on some of the core rules for uh, the different editions. For example, we don't really have a fifth edition MMO or an MMO based on fifth edition that I'm aware of, but we do have Neverwinter, which is loosely based on the fourth edition version of the game, and then we also have Dungeons and Dragons Online, or DDO for short, which is a unique MMO based loosely on the 3.5 rule set. And I've talked about those before, and we've looked at some of the character creation of that before. But we don't really have anything based on AD&D on the MMO sphere that I'm aware of. Um, but we do have a number of RPGs that came out prior to like Warcraft in 2004 becoming popular. So what was happening is at the end of around the end of the 80s, TSR wasn't doing that well with Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, they had put out the second edition, but right before they got bought out by TSR, or previous to that, like in first edition, second edition, they were putting out all kinds of video games, RPGs, not necessarily MMOs, but RPGs, role playing games on the that would use the tabletop as an inspiration. And we had things such as Neverwinter Nights. We had like Planetscape, and they used the different settings, um, uh, the different settings of the world. And some of these settings, like uh, Dragonlance, were popular. They're not as popular as something like the Forgotten Realms, which is kind of like a de facto, has turned into the de facto campaign setting, but they had such things as a Planetscape, or Planescape. I think it's called Planescape, and they had Dragonlands, and stuff like that. And so what I wanted to do today, before going too deep into any of that, any more history, I wanted to go ahead and take a look at this game, Dungeons and Dragons Baldur's Gate, which is now going somewhat of a resurgence or a renaissance. The old school players that are kind of nostalgic about playing it. I never really played it back in the day, so some of us are discovering it for the first time, or maybe played it a little bit but didn't really go into it too much. Um, and it's an RPG based on Dungeons and Dragons. But what's interesting is it's based on and what got my piqued my interest was it's based on Dungeons and Dragons Second Edition. So there's no MMO that I'm aware of based on Second Edition rules, but we do have this, which is an RPG um, isometric type interface, and you'll see what I mean if I show you footage of this game. So what I thought we would do is, because I've been kind of playing this game, and as a result of my interest in second edition, we can go ahead and take a look at Baldur's Gate. And the original, this is actually the enhanced edition, which kind of like a remake of the original, but with a little bit of souped up on the graphics, but not too much. Still has that old D&D RPG kind of feel to it. So I thought we'd take a look at character creation and see how this game handles the character creation portion of in Dungeons and Dragons. All right, guys. So this is the opening screen for Baldur's Gate Enhanced Edition. I turned down all the sound and all the uh, turn down the theme music. It's got some pretty good music, and if you want to listen to it, you can. If you download this game, or you can check it out on YouTube. But in order to not interfere with the character creation process, I went ahead and turned that down. So the game has a tutorial, which is recommended for new players. If you're a newbie, you never played it, tutorial is what they recommend. And there's a Baldur's Gate, which you actually go straight into the game itself. So let's do the tutorial part of it. So you start character creation basic, and what's cool about this game, even though it did have multiplayer back in the day, I'm just running like single player right now on my local machine, and you can create a character from scratch, or you could I actually if you want companions to go along with you in your party, you can actually create an entire party. I think it's like 5 or 6 character slots. I don't remember. We'll go through it. So basically, what you do is you can choose it from scratch, or you can go into this import function. So let's do that. So if you hit on import, um, well, I think well let's just start with the character creation. So you'd be a male, and then it gives you these like character portraits, which are pretty cool. There's your elf, your standard second edition fantasy trope, nothing out of the ordinary. You got your half orc. There's your magician. This guy here looks kind of like a bard or a thief. So I guess he's a bard because he seems like he has an instrument. And here's your standard dwarf fighter with a weapon. So and your archer. So if you want to be like a do range attacks. So, but just for demonstration purposes, I think this one here is good. So I like dwarves, and that guy looks pretty cool. So then you can also import your own if you have one that you don't want to use the default, but this is fine. We're done with that, and then you pick your race. So if you go into race, it's got your standard races for Dungeons and Dragons second edition, like your humans and your elves and your half elves and your dwarves. Um, but what's cool is it gives you like a description. And I'm just gonna check real quick, if you don't mind, if they are straight forward from the actual player's handbook, or if they're how close it is. I think it's a pretty close match. The races start, or the classes actually, on second edition, they start on page 20 of the player's handbook, and they start with the dwarves. Dwarves tend to be short, stocky fellows, easily identified by their shape. They tend to be dark. Yeah, it seems like it's right straight from the book. So gives you a description of what they are. But the interesting part is it depends on your gameplay and your class. Dwarves have the following traits. They get a +2 bonus to saving throws against paralysis, poison, and death, and also against rod, staff, and wands, and against spells with additional bonuses based on their constitution. They also get infravision, of course, because they're dwarves and they're underground, plus 10% open locks, 15% bonus to find traps, plus 5% detect illusion, plus 10% set traps. You got and also with the ability scores, what I really liked about second edition, but I don't know if it's the same in fifth edition. I can't remember, but back in second edition, you would get your ability bonuses based on your race. In this case, I'm a dwarf, and I'm based on your race and class combination. If you Because dwarves are stocky and rough, they get a +1 to the Constitution, but they also get negative they gave some penalties to their abilities, like a -1 dexterity, because they kind of try to balance it out. And they're not supposed to be very dexterous or fast like an elf, so they get a -1 on their dexterity, and they're -2 in charisma. This corresponds with the book, of course. It's all following second edition. So that's the class, and then you get to did I pick a class? Oh no, I have to pick. So I could be a fighter, a cleric. That was the race rather, but your class is a fighter, cleric, thief. Now I heard you can't go wrong with fighter, because fighter, you always have some bonuses. For the fighters, you can achieve um specialization, two slots of specializations in any fighting style, and allocate 3 slots in 2 weapon style. Now with second edition, what happened was they didn't call them skills like we talked about in the past. If you've watched the second edition videos that I've posted on this channel, but we had back in second edition, what we didn't have skills, but we had like weapons proficiency and what they call non-weapon proficiency. So and you could specialize. And the good thing about the fighter is that the fighter can achieve, like it says here, specialization 2 slots, because they gave you like a number of slots, kind of like the way they do the spell slots in fifth edition, where you have a number of slots and you can put the different spells in there. Well, you can specialize, and this was, by the way, an optional rule in second edition, but a lot of people used it. So you could have the specialize, take 2 slots in any fighting style, and then you can any fighting style and allocate 3 slots into the 2 weapon style, which is pretty cool. And because you're a fighter, you got a pretty good hit. You're pretty tough. The hit die will be D10, which I think is the highest, or maybe Barbarians like a little higher, but it's pretty high. But they also need prime requisites for dual classing, which is the strength. So you have to have a pretty high strength. So we have that. And they also had later on in second edition they came up with the class kits, and the class kit is basically, you can think of it as like a build, like a specialized build. So not only do you have your fighter, but you have a fighter that will have the special skills. So you have that. You could be a berserker, you could be a wizard slayer, a barbarian. Barbarian's interesting. Of course, it hasn't changed. You can rage. Basically, the enraged status lasts for 5 rounds and provides a +4 bonus to strength. So, what's it? At 11th level, you get a 10% bonuses there. The hit die is like D12, so this is the actual highest you can go, or one of the highest you can go, if not the highest. So let's go with a straight fighter though, because I think that's good enough for our purposes. So they're done with that. Alignment. Can you choose an alignment? Yeah, you can choose an alignment, and these determine how your character would interact with his environment. This is very important actually, because in second edition, depending on your alignment, you're gonna be able to, if you have charisma or if you have a specific ability, and if you're like lawful good versus another alignment, people will treat you differently in the game. You're able to do a certain amount of things. This idea kind of carried over into later games and later MMOs. You find an alignment system in EverQuest 2, for example, where you can play a chaotic character. I think I've talked about it when I did the character creation video for that game. But in EverQuest 2, if you choose a chaotic, you can play a chaotic evil, that's all the way evil and be chaotic evil, but you're gonna pay the consequence, because you go to a city, the alignment is different, the guards will attack you. There are some consequences, and there are some here too. But so we'll stick with let's see. I don't remember what. I guess you could do any. Don't know if dwarves are necessarily always lawful good like paladins. It could be neutral good. Whatever. It's up to you. It's your game style. Okay. And here is where we get to the nuts and bolts of the whole thing, where you can actually make your basic statistics. You can have a pre-made and it already has the statistics, but the way where it works in this game is you get a total roll, and you can re-roll your stats every time. So if you hit re-roll, you see your stats are changing. Like right here, the total roll is 76, 78, 70, and you're trying to get a high roll like in the 80s. If you get something in the 80s, it's pretty good because it distributes the points on your abilities. And in order to be a fighter, you obviously want like really good strength. Like this would not be good. So this would be good. You get like a 17, dexterity is 14, and you have a pretty decent constitution because 10 is the base, kind of like the normal, like a normal human would be like a 10 without any armor class. So this is not bad. Wisdom is kind of low, but you're not going to get any spell. You're not going to be using spells too much or at all because you're not a spell casting class. So I don't know if I would re-roll that. So I think I might just go with that. So your strength ended up being 17, your dexterity is 14, your constitution is 12, your intelligence is 13, your wisdom is a 9, and your charisma is a 12, as you can see. So the last thing, you take that. Not the last thing, but the next thing is you got your proficiency slot. So you're proficient, you get 4 slots basically to get proficiency in any of these in this weapons, right? And I should have probably written it down, and I did not. But um, so it doesn't really matter. I mean, I'm just kind of demonstrating. But if you were making the build, you kind of want to go with the weapons that you will give you a bonus. So let's say you fighter, you get like you a long sword. You can put like a slot there, and that'll give you a slot with 1 proficiency. The character can use the weapon with no penalties, and you can be specialized. You can read all about the different specializations where you keep going up, all the way up to like grandmaster is like 5. And then like we get 3, so we could get an axe and maybe like a club and one last one. It's good to have a dagger because sometimes you're doing like melee and you gotta stab somebody. But I didn't choose. This is just for demonstration, but I didn't choose the most optimal. But what you want to do is you want to read your proficiency. So if you're a dwarf fighter, you might be proficient with an axe, and that you want to go with axe, obviously. So whatever weapon gives you the most, because the whole thing about this game is they'll throw you out into the wild. Even in the tutorial, you're gonna go out and you're gonna have encounters, and you may not survive if you don't have a lot of health or a lot of hit points. That's the thing about advanced Dungeons and Dragons versus like the new versions of D&D. In AD&D, it was pretty brutal, pretty tough, a pretty savage world that you go out there. And if you don't have a party that's very well balanced that can do the melee as well as the ranged attacks, or if just you're just adventuring by yourself, but you're not able to specialize, or you're not prepared, you don't have a lot of health, you'll end up dying and having to re-roll the character more often than not. And you still do that sometimes if you get into trouble. So let's go there. So we got our everything that we need. And the last thing is the appearance. I don't spend a lot of time on this, so you got your sliders, and it kind of changes the color of your hair and that type of thing. It's not very advanced. I mean, obviously the MMOs that came later did a way better job of but this is like your basic. You can change the skin, a little different clothing, your armor, whatever you feel is good. And then you can pick. This is kind of cool. You can pick your character voice. So there's the default, or you can try out like
death to you all.
So put the volume a little bit so you can hear.
Your life ends here.
Yeah. So they got some default sounds. Doesn't affect the game that mechanics. So it's just kind of cosmetic. And then we're done. So we're done. That's the last thing is we put a name, and you name your character. Sir Fights a Lot. Let's see. So we have Sir Fights a Lot, and you can read about his stats and his proficiencies. He's proficient with a long sword, of the axe, the dagger, and the club. And then you go ahead and accept that. And you can go, let me go back and see, give you the other option that you have is you can also import characters. So if I were to hit import, there's a whole character file which gives you the different type of character classes and character races. So you can be a fighter, You can be a thief, your standard paladin, standard D&D stuff, the cleric. So let's say I wanted a cleric in my party because you always want to have a cleric because somebody's got to heal you up if you get banged up in battle, right? That's mostly what the clerics are for. So you get a cleric and you're done, and you can import him straight into the party. But let's go ahead and accept this, and just create the party. So here, so it's 3, 4, 6 character slots. So you can have a whole party with six. If you get more than six, then it would be too cumbersome because you have to control the other characters, just you. So and then you can go back to create from scratch or import. So you can either create it from scratch like we just did, or we can import that. Let's import one just for the sake of doing it. Character file. Go with a Here's a Barbarian, which is chaotic neutral. So he makes a good warrior. So you import that. Um, give him appearance and give him that.
Get over here. Right then.
Okay. Import accept name. Oh, I didn't give him a name. Tenera's okay. They accept. Okay, so there he is, and he's joined your party. So you don't have to go at this game alone, which is so pretty cool. So, but for the sake of brevity, don't want to make this video too long. We'll go ahead and do that, and we'll hit play. And so, then you can set a difficulty. Story mode is basically the easiest you can go. If you want to enjoy the story of the backdrop and the background of the backdrop of the game, you just go in story mode, and you'll get all the bonuses and all the benefits. But that's boring. I mean, nobody usually wants to do that. If you go in easy mode, you gain a +6 bonus to luck, and then enemies have their damage reduced by 50%, which is pretty cool. But I usually go into like normal. Enemies will deal 25%. You don't want to go into hard and insane because we're brand new. But we can go at normal, which is enemies are dealing a quarter of less damage, and your party members are not going to permanently die. You can bring them back. Hit point rolls are maximized, and spells can be copied into spell books without failure. If we had a wizard in our party, in second edition, what was cool, and again, I don't remember if this happens in fifth edition. I don't think so, but in second edition and in AD&D, you didn't just if you were a spellcaster like a wizard or a cleric or whatever you were, and you cast a spell, it didn't necessarily happen. It wasn't necessarily successful. You sometimes you would have to roll depending on the circumstances. You would have to roll on the percentile table, and you could have a percentage of depending on what roll you got, what the die came out with. You would have a chance of your spell not going off. So you have your spell, you cast it, but it doesn't do anything. It's a bummer, but there is a chance of that. But in this normal mode in this game, the that doesn't happen. You can copy your spells into your spell books, and there's not going to be any spell failure of any kind when you cast them. Okay, and then that's it. You venture forth, and there's the game starts. And you're greeted by an NPC, and then just this is what I meant by isometric. So the isometric is like kind of like a map view type of thing, where it's not necessarily flat, or this is in this case like an overhead, and you just kind of follow if you played any RTS games, or if you play like Diablo or something like that, then you're pretty familiar, because Diablo actually was way more popular than Baldur's Gate or these type of games when it came out in 2000, 2002, whatever it was, the original Diablo, because it took some of these concepts, but insane amount of monsters and characters. So and here maybe I'll do a follow-up video to do the different what all these functions are. I'm planning to play the heck out of this game because I want to get into. There's a second verse. Once you finish this game, it takes about 100 hours of gameplay or something. And once you finish it out and you learn all about those different zones and different areas, you can go and play Baldur's Gate 2, which is actually supposed to be even better or just as good as the original. So I plan to do both, and because I like second edition and I like all games based on Dungeons and Dragons, obviously. So anyway, guys, that is my look, kind of quick look at Baldur's Gate, the original, the enhanced edition. And like I said, I might do if you like this content, I might do a follow-up video where we actually look at more gameplay and we go into like the functions, like because all these little things do different things. This is kind of like your basic RPG though. Like
My
you
next
can.
topic is on how to differentiate enemies from people you want to talk to.
This is a
Enemies have
tutorial.
red circles. People you want to talk to have blue circles.
So it tells you, gives you like different steps if you're completely new, and then you get out into the world once you finish the tutorial, like a lot of games. So I hope you enjoyed this uh, cursory brief look into character creation for Baldur's Gate, the original Baldur's Gate, or actually the enhanced edition with a little bit souped up graphics. And if you like this content, go ahead and hit the like or hit the subscribe icon, and we will do some more, or I will record some more for you. Thanks for joining.